Good afternoon, members. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Apologies, our Zoom room's capacity was exceeded today. So in one way, I guess that's a good problem. So hopefully this video will allow those that couldn't join us in the Zoom room to catch up on what we presented. Your participation is appreciated. We will be changing the capacity limits on the account so that going forward, we can continue to collaborate and stay together as we look on your behalf to promote business aviation and simplify the lives of our operators. So thanks for joining us, and we will chat soon. Stay well. So let's move into the conversation. So I want to first thank our sponsors, in this case, Standard Aero and Trainingport. It's a difficult time in the industry, as we know, and their support ensures we are able to get this message to you and conversely get yours to the folks in government. So we want to thank both Standard Aero and the team at Trainingport for their support. Three main themes that I'd like to cover through the conversation today. The first is related to COVID. Second would be, what are we doing as the association to promote business aviation? And lastly, to simplify the lives of business aviation operators. So let's go first to the COVID slide. What we're seeing here, NAV Canada provides an excellent snapshot of COVID across the country. And what I wanted to do is highlight here, this is the most recent data sent just this week. And of course, as we know, the troublesome problem, of course, in Canada is the quarantine restrictions in the provinces. And the example I'd like to highlight is, of course, Atlantic Canada. And as we know, if you watched some of the news yesterday, the challenges that WestJet expressed and some of their desire to pull out, these kinds of problems are occurring, and these quarantine restrictions continue to be a problem. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about what we've been up to on that fact. So since July, we've been advocating for rapid testing. In other words, a program that we called CBAA Flight Plan. The intent here was to talk about the limitations to the PCR test, the nasal swab that we are accustomed to seeing. What we were advocating for and continue to advocate is for rapid testing. The idea that this rapid testing should be used in a program to avoid quarantine. We've been working with folks like Michael Mina out of Harvard to develop these ideas, and we've been advocating for that on your behalf with the government. We've also made the case that business aviation is the perfect test case because of our ability to contact trace. We know where our folks are. We know who's on the aircraft, et cetera. We know how to get a hold of them. We have, in terms of socially distanced, we don't have the queues in terms of baggage or check-in, those kinds of ideas. So we've been busy advocating on those efforts. Beyond the ideas of quarantine, what we've also been pushing for is an official interpretation from the government. Specifically, I want to shout out to Jameson Collins. I'm not sure if he's in the line in the chat there, but what we did is together draft a letter of official interpretation that we've sent both to CBSA, to the officials at PHAC, and to Transport Canada. And the intent here was to get a very clear understanding. We've heard from you, and we continue to hear across the industry the challenges that the quarantine issues and the idea that the CBSA agents make that determination at the port of entry. There's been some, as you all know, I'm sure you can find a couple wild interpretations. Some folks that accurately interpret the regs and permit entry to not only Canadians, but other folks that need to do business in Canada. But we also run into issues with our flight crews, our maintenance flights, bringing crew members in for training to Canada. So on this slide here, you're going to find the three cases that we made. So in the official orders, there are three carve-outs, three exemptions. 6A is for crew members. 6E are for individuals that have roles within PHAC that PHAC defined that are essential. That little scan me that you see on your screen, that takes you to that list of PHAC roles. Last, of course, is 6N, a Canadian returning back home to Canada for otherwise doing something that they needed to do, basically that required entry into the United States. So these are the process, and we'll update you on where this is, but this is the official interpretation, the letter that we put forward to those agencies. So what we get from government probably can be described best in this image. Um, we've been chatting very actively with PHAC. Of course, as you may know, in late September, they had a new president come in. So we've been chatting at the very highest levels with some of their VPs, talking about using testing to avoid quarantine. And with this new leadership, we're very active in engaging with the new team to educate them very quickly on, what is business aviation? How can we educate them on our contact tracing, our FBOs, the process that our operators undertake, and really drive home the idea for willingness for testing. Last, in terms of Transport Canada, for our operators specifically, we've asked Nick directly, and he's, as we speak, considering amending the letter that we provided to you, our operators, back in March. So this letter was drafted from the desk at the Director General of Transport Canada, Nick Robinson, and it defined things like what are flight crews, but more specifically, we want to bring black and white clarity to the idea of crews returning for training. So again, crews by definition is both the pilots, our cabin safety attendants, maintenance, managers, those essential roles that have already been defined. So what we're saying is let's put in directly that returning from training is one of those qualifications, maintenance flights, those types of things. So we're trying to push the government on that direction. With respect to where do we go from here, I think the reminder is that customs officers ultimately have the final authority to determine the port of entry, whether or not you can continue. A best practice certainly is, from our standpoint, over prepare for that crossing. That you've got the best way to proceed is to build a binder, pull the letters from Transport Canada, pull letters from your corporations. We've shared some of these in our WhatsApp operator group. So if you're a flight ops operator, if you haven't heard, we've stood up this tool with WhatsApp to get you timely information. In the same way that we can get you timely information, we get to hear firsthand from operator experience about what your concerns are. So the first is over prepare for the entry. Having a binder that shows all of those letters, you're trying to put your best foot forward for really that one or two individuals that meet you at the aircraft if they're going to clear you in. We are working hard here in Ottawa to ensure that their interpretation, and we get this is a frustrating element. We can talk to leadership at CBSA here in Ottawa, but because the determination is made at the port of entry, we are trying to get a consistent official interpretation so that we can provide that clarity, one, to our operators, so that you can do the job informing an agent in the event there is some gray area. So we are going to continue this effort here in Ottawa, and we're going to push the message about the responsibility and what we need to do. I should also add, I'm looking at the chat here and making sure if there's any questions at any point, I want to make this interactive. I certainly don't want to. Right now, we've got the mics muted just for just everybody's ability to hear. And I'm watching that the team is set and commenting there. So we'll see what we can do going forward, but we will have to push on Twitter. I'm just watching one thing for Amy and Lindsay. We will push the recording immediately after the fact. And the reason is that I hear a duplicate when I go live. So that'll be that. So with respect to COVID and CBSA and quarantine and some of the issues, that's sort of where we are. Now, an extension of COVID is its impact on our industry. I suppose the best way to frame this section about GTA and sort of the government response is being a day late and a dollar short would probably be the right way to frame that. So what we're seeing, if you're an operator in Canada, if you're specifically based in Toronto Pearson, you'll have seen the rate increases that have been planned. So if you're under 19,000 kilograms, the rate increase is planned at 92%. So you're going from effectively $300 odd to $575 on the landing fee. If you're over 19,000 kilograms, you're going up about 3%. Now, what are we doing about this? Well, one, we're very obviously, as an association, against the increase. There are still some fundamental questions that need to be answered by the GTA, and we're going to schedule those meetings and present the information. A couple examples. One, is this increase temporary or permanent? In the guidance, if you've seen it, and the team can make it available, whether it's through our document library or just going directly to the GTA website. In the case that they present to industry, it's the line that, hey, fee increases haven't occurred. Of course, a 92% increase under any circumstance isn't acceptable. So we want to know, is this temporary? Is this a permanent effort? Will things be rolled back to pre-COVID levels once traffic levels return? Will there be a payment model like in NAV Canada, where we're seeing a deferred payment structure, say, over 5 years? So what flexibility, if any, is available as a result of COVID? The bigger problem, though, ultimately around the airports is just the idea that because of really a lack of a response from the government, airports across the country, I'm concerned, and we're going to be very active in collaborating with the airports to understand how are they managing this experience. Because going forward, the operators, and this is just more as a did you know, the rent relief program that the government provided to airports, when rent is a function of the revenue that the airport brings in times where you've got 90, 88% drop in traffic, your revenue's fallen off anyways. And this rent relief that the government has claimed as a win really doesn't benefit the airports at all. Now, why do I mention this? It's not that I'm trying to sympathize with the airports. It's to understand that how we view the challenges our partners in the industry are experiencing will shape how we respond to it. And what we're expecting and what we want to build out is collaboration, right? We need to understand that if this gets you through a window of time, then we need to be able to roll back, or we need to push the government to provide the appropriate amount of funding so that we don't have to go through these experiences. So the big ask here is, especially on GTAA and the government, is if you haven't already reached out to either your federal MP, your provincial MPP, if you want to know more, if you want to find out how can I get engaged, please feel free to reach out to the association. Very often, the method to success here is for you to play that role, to inform them, to say, hey, listen, this isn't working for me in my operation. One of the benefits, of course, is we've got a list of, if you're based at Toronto Pearson, who are the individuals in government that you want to reach out to if your operation is based there. And this is important because I think two paths need to exist. One, the government needs to recognize that the air industry is in turmoil. We're the first to feel the impact from COVID, and we will be the last to recover. Another key message that I've shared with some of the senior leaders in the federal political parties is that this isn't just an issue for Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, Transat, et cetera, et cetera. This is an issue that impacts scheduled, non-scheduled commercial operators, the airports, our air navigation providers, our industry, and therefore a response that's effective in order to get Canadians moving needs to recognize that the entire industry is dealing with this challenge. So with respect to GTAA, I see that we've posted that in the chat. You'll find some of the documents there, but we are working to set up those high-level meetings with GTA leadership to get those questions answered and to build a response plan, because perhaps as a bit of dominoes, as GTA goes, so do the other airports. And it's very important for us to stay active on this file. As you've probably seen, some of the airports are already starting with airport improvement fee charges, increases, et cetera. So it's an important file for us. And if you're concerned with it, as I expect that you are, please stay engaged with us so that we can share your story. Those kinds of stories have a tremendous impact in terms of getting the ear of members of government. So let's talk a little bit about NAV Canada. So I think what we're seeing here is, what, if any, unintended consequences do we experience as a result of cost cutting? If you're a member and you've seen our response to NAV Canada with their fee increases, we're seeing this now with these terms of reference, these changes. So I'm going to pause as you look at this list here on your screen. There are 25 listed here. And if you're an operation that visits any one of these locations, and I think of a couple that stand out, Fort McMurray, Peace River, Castlegar, Sydney, Nova Scotia. There's probably others that I'm just glancing over. But NAV Canada is engaging in this consultation period to determine, as you see there, review of air traffic service requirements. And so the understanding is what if any changes that they're planning to those locations impact our operations. And I think it's important for us to ensure that we unpack those unintended consequences. Perhaps it's hours of service reductions. So if you're an operator and you're visiting those facilities, reach out to the association. We'll connect you with the teams that are conducting the review, and that'll allow you the opportunity to provide directly the feedback about your experience if it touches those 25 locations. So that's an important one to address. So let's talk a little bit about promoting business aviation. So I haven't seen any questions in the chat. So again, don't be shy. There's going to be either some time in between, or when Merlin and I talk a little bit about CARS modernization and what we're doing on simplifying the lives of business aviation operators. Perhaps that's where some of the questions will come through. But in terms of promoting business aviation, as a reminder, the team in Ottawa here, the small but mighty team, exists to promote and simplify the lives of business aviation operators in our industry. And in terms of promoting business aviation, I wanted to mention the microsite that we launched at the end of September, just recently. It's been said that you can't change what people think, but you can change the way they think about things. And that's an important line, because what we need to do as an industry is share the facts of our emissions, celebrate the accomplishments we've made, but also share the commitment that we have to environmental stewardship. And that's going to be a big focus of ours. We understand the importance of that file. So it's important to share first the idea of global greenhouse gas emissions and the idea of understanding what aviation's contribution is. And you can see it circled in green there at 1.9%. You can start looking around the color wheel and finding other areas of opportunity. Perhaps it's energy use in buildings, residential and commercial, road transport, etc. Often we get asked the question by operators specifically, or even questions in the media, what is business aviation's contribution to that 1.9%? And through our partnership with the Sustainable Aviation Fuels Coalition, this is the number that we get to see. It's basically 2% of that 2%. So in other words, it's a tiny, minuscule contribution. And it's important to share this information. And this is what the microsite attempts to do. So aviation, and more specifically business aviation, we know is a minuscule emitter. And it's important for us to share the facts about that. But as we talked about, it's also important to celebrate our accomplishments and to celebrate what we're doing about the environment, because those are the things that leaders in terms of the political sphere, they start tuning into. And I'm excited to talk about a little bit further about some of that government relations in the next couple slides. But specifically related to the environment, it's about sharing the facts, celebrating our accomplishments, and sharing that commitment that we have to environmental stewardship. So the microsite is live today. It's available in French and in English. And through the sponsors that we had there, we are going to continue this message both with government, with media, and with you, our operators, because together with a voice that shares those facts, celebrates those accomplishments, etc., we're going to move the message quite a bit further. So let's talk a little bit about, when we continue this theme of promoting business aviation, how about let's talk about promoting this essential tool for getting Canadian businesses moving again. So what you see here is our message to the Finance Committee before the government was on break, and we're going to pick this back up. But this message resonated because we had the opportunity to meet and speak directly with Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative finance critic, on this topic. So we're trying to, one, educate the government of the day, in this case the Liberals, about what our concerns are, where we think there's opportunity. But it's also building the coalition with the opposition parties to understand the importance of, in this case, business aviation. And I wanted to share a couple of these points. So this is just one slide that shares our short-term view, and then what we thought about long-term recovery. So specifically, we talk about working with the business aviation community to promote and use those rapid tests, specifically to avoid quarantine. It goes back to that day late, dollar short aspect. we are still way behind, the government is, on the use of testing, and specifically getting to the place where we have enough data to make an informed decision about quarantine, but we're pushing forward here. We're talking about accelerating use of the technologies that are available, suspending federal taxes on jet fuel and avgas. Important here, the accelerated capital cost allowance, expense tax reduction credit, and rebates applied to the purchase, the modification and upgrade of health and safety equipment related to COVID-19. So this is everything from what you, the operators, are doing today in partnership with our associate members. How are you ensuring that your operations are continuing to be safe, reliable, and efficient? So this is the short-term asks. The long-term ones, creating that program, a federal financial stimulus program that would encourage the purchase and the environmental modernization of business aircraft materials and services. So really it's about saying, hey, let's make sure Canadian businesses have the tools they need to get the job done. And this is about setting the foundation to allow that to happen. Recommendation 2 is pretty clear. This was about the luxury tax. If you remember, the Liberals had proposed, and one of the issues, and of course, in a minority government, when they proposed the 10% luxury tax on aircraft. Of course, we know that if you're flying a twin-engine aircraft and it happens to have wings, that aircraft is over $100,000, which means you qualify right away for the 10% tax. And we made the case very clearly that there's already sufficient tax on the industry. Things like the purchase of the aircraft, the personal use of the aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. Working with industry to create a modernized set of Canadian aviation regulations, which we will talk about. We talk about our small operators. We talk about how important that is. Last is, of course, the message on the climate and the support of sustainable aviation fuels. The biggest way that we can make a difference here is through the use of sustainable aviation fuels. And our message to the government has been that Canada can be seen as a leader, both in the development and the use of sustainable aviation fuels. But in order for that to happen, incentives need to be created. And this isn't new, this happens all the time. So for us, the message on sustainable aviation fuel is very critical. Now, what this has resulted in, as we talked about letters, these letters, this engagement has resulted in direct meetings with, in this case, Pierre Poilievre. We also have reached out and had a direct with the new conservative transport critic, Stephanie Kuzy from Calgary. She's been very active on the file, and we've had a conversation here on that. What it's also led to is a letter directly from the new official opposition critic from the Conservatives, Erin O'Toole. Our job has always been to promote and simplify business aviation. And it's our role here in Ottawa to advocate for the members in the industry. In other words, to be in the places that you can't while you're busy running your operations. And so it's encouraging. This letter actually arrived yesterday. And it's an example of the work and the effort that this team here in Ottawa is undertaking on your behalf to ensure that the concerns we have in our industry are addressed. So let's see, no questions. This is good. I'm saying thanks to Amy and Lindsay for responding in some of the letters and questions that have come up on specific links. Let's move to the ideas of simplifying business aviation operators. So the first is a pretty easy one. We know that winter is approaching. And we had a member message come through that Transport Canada's website did not yet have accurate information on the winter 2021 list. So I'm going to just copy this over here, copy this link, paste it in the chat here for everyone. What we did is we have informed Transport of their miss, and so they're going to ultimately update their website. But right there, you'll find a link directly to the winter 2020 and 2021 hot tables, so your holdover times. So let's move to the next phase of our modernization efforts. And I know Merlin, I see you there. I'm making sure that he's there. But what we're going to do here is talk about that commitment to simplifying the lives of our operators. And this modernization effort is really the expression, that commitment of our action. We have been very busy in trying to understand what efforts need to be modernized in order to allow our operators to succeed. So Merlin, I know you're there, and I'm going to get you to ask you to come on mute. But the three things I want to highlight from this list, and I recognize this is an eyesore. This is not designed to talk individually about these items. I want to call out three in particular. The team has posted in the chat our document library. You will be able to find that, and I believe Lindsay might even post directly to the CARS modernization effort. But three things that I think are relevant, perhaps to the group here today, that may cause some questions. First is the SMS for small operators. We recognize that those operators operating fewer aircraft, 3 or fewer, it's trouble to generate the necessary data in order to effectively run a safety management system. And so we are asking for some flexibility there and performance-based approach, modernizing the way we view that. With respect to MEL approvals, one of the toeholds that we've been able to do in partnership with Ed Ratzleff is to, on the association's behalf, petition to have MEL approval for 604 operators. And that was successful, and effectively it's a permanent designation. We're asking to expand that then to our 704, because we understand that there are concerns related to MELs and obtaining that level of service from the government. So that's a second one. Third one that I think is of relevance and touches on the COVID is the online and virtual training, the idea of modernizing the way we view training. And this is all about using and removing the ideas of face-to-face, allow operators to use performance-based requirements and to use the latest technology that's available. And operators like our sponsor Training Port have available for operators. So I'm going to pause there and kick it over to Merlin to see, as we've talked about both COVID and CARS modernization, maybe Merlin, a few updates from you with respect to what you're seeing and what you want to share with our operators.
First, generally speaking, with regard to the modernization, these things are sitting in a queue. How long the queue is, I don't know, but as time goes on, I'll be talking with TC about where they are with various things that we've submitted. There were literally thousands of suggestions put in, but that doesn't mean that the ones that are important to us are just left in that queue. We go after transport as required to get some of this stuff sorted out. Perhaps from the regulatory front, a couple quick updates from the operations with NAV Canada. First of all, there's continuing concern for those operators not equipped with upper and lower antennas to be able to use ADS-B in our airspace as time goes forward. We've confirmed with NAV Canada that there's nothing happening right now, and we'll get lots of warning before it does in terms of them expanding the ADS-B airspace requirements. They, of course, run into some financial difficulties in terms of now staff availability to do things. The other thing, and I know it pops up relatively often, it shouldn't pop up at all, but it does, where flights are identified because of the ADS-B broadcasts, and then you find your name in the newspaper because on one case, I think our American friends came in and they were accused of breaking quarantine. So NAV Canada is working with the FAA to get a system set up where you can't identify the aircraft. And in fact, I had a meeting as recently as day before yesterday. So that's ongoing. The other thing that's been troubling people is what's happening with the exemptions that we're using to get away from having to go down to the United States for training. And in that particular vein, the promise is that the training in aircraft and the other related training and checking exemptions will be extended. They're subject to some internal analysis, but I can't imagine them doing anything else because the alternative is they're going to shut us down, and that's just not going to happen. So that's really all I have by way of an update for this part. If there's any questions, of course, we'll take them and deal with them as we go forward this afternoon. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Merlin. Perfect. That break actually gave me a chance to look at the chat, and specifically Simone, yes, we could only hope that COVID's impact would cancel the winter season altogether. And Scott made reference to the idea of rain. Well, of course, this is the benefit on the West Coast. On the topic of NAV Canada, I noticed that I had a private message from Jeff Carlisle, the idea of what are we doing to address the huge rate increases. So the way we are addressing NAV Canada, if our response to NAV was on a couple different prongs. So one, the idea was trying to get them to understand, like, hey, we understand that they are saying there's a shortfall. We push them to identify measures to cut their costs. Once they cut those costs, please update as the shortfall has been identified. If that number changes, let's adjust the program to reflect that new number. In other words, let's celebrate the cost savings that the organization is able to find. Two, the idea that the government needs to play a role in funding. I mean, the models that have been enacted, whether it's NAV Canada, the airport authorities, et cetera, COVID has interrupted those models. And as a result, it can't just be on the operators to cover this shortfall. There needs to be a recognition that COVID has had this impact. We've all seen, where is Canada in relation to funding of the air industry as a result of COVID, and it's certainly not done. So Jeff, I think the answer on NAV is we are working together with NAV. They have the ability, so we had that flexibility to kind of push. We made a recommendation even on the 5-year term to scale, and we're going to continue to push NAV Canada to scale the repayment timeline so that you recognize that if we start to, and we expect to have that recovery, that you would sort of scale up your commitment in the back half of that 5-year strategy. So we're continuing to push on those areas. I'm looking just as we clear here, Patrick, talking about some of the pilots and training, no issues, which is good with respect to our flight training providers. And that's been very good. I mean, in the way that our training providers have understood, one, the commitment that our crews have as we go for training, they're keeping their end of the agreement by keeping those facilities up to date. And certainly the best practices that we've been able to share, Patrick, from those experiences from your operators and from others, the ability when we're coming back home to learn what were some of the key questions. One idea as an example is from some of our Western operators, a nugget that I would ask you to consider is that use the language that says you are assigned to duty in that essential role. Yes, you're going for training, but you've been assigned to duty in order to complete that essential role. We talked about the response that we have from Transport Canada regarding the letter so that it's clearly articulated. But if you are in the process and you're putting your best foot forward and you're creating that binder, your crews are assigned to duty for that essential role. And you be very clear about that language and it can smooth the approach back. Customs agents being confused. Yeah, this has been a big problem, and it's been so uneven. We've got an operator in the East Coast, a story that I'm quite familiar with, where they did everything right and way beyond any one of the regulations that are out there. Organization allows them to use their corporate aircraft to transport the pilots down for training. The pilots that are on the aircraft decide, company supports the idea of a COVID test prior to return. They all test negative. 3 pilots have to sit in the back because 2 obviously have to fly the aircraft. Upon clearance, 3 pilots in the back, they're told quarantine. 2 pilots in the front, you're exempt. Doesn't make any sense, and we get that. And then the same thing can be happening on another part of the country, and there's been zero issue. So in the end, this is a very, very challenging time, and we appreciate how sincere that is, and we are working like super hard to try to inform CBSA. I mean, even as we are preparing today, advanced letters. I mean, I've been chatting at the highest levels, Merlin and I. We've engaged with PHAC. We're getting this letter from TC. So our efforts are not done, but it really does expose that gap that those individual officers, the discretion, the authority that they have to exercise. So we're trying to work this out. Esan, very, very interesting comment, right? Like, I mean, a 92% increase for aircraft under 19,000 kilograms. It's like, maybe that's how they'll cover the gap. And maybe that speaks to our recovery and the fact that we continue to operate and that you all continue to operate. And when you think of our role in getting Canadians moving again. What we're seeing, say, with that WestJet announcement in Atlantic Canada, the quarantine issue is definitely one. If you're an operator in the West, if I went all the way back to that NAV Canada slide, to our members in Atlantic Canada in that bubble, imagine the challenge. I mean, we're trying to get there. You get an automatic 14-day quarantine. Well, the big issue now is with folks like WestJet pulling back, Air Canada doing the same. There's fewer and fewer commercial alternatives available. So this, I think, creates a sustainable opportunity for business aviation operators, whether that's charter, fractional, wholly owned, whatever the model. More and more folks are going to get engaged about understanding what these time machines can do. And I'm just taking a look very quickly before we move on. Let's see, we got 20 minutes left. So, oh, and Simon, the idea of calling the escalation line, that is a great experience. We've had some cases where, and again, it's an example of frustration, but for our operators, and maybe I could ask Lindsay to post the number, the CBSA escalation line. So we stood this up, and getting CBSA moving in the direction about trying to escalate. One of my favorite exception rules is never accept a no from somebody who's not empowered to say yes. And so what we tried to do with this escalation line is provide an outlet. And it on balance, it's been a very productive tool, but there's still an opportunity for CBSA to improve. So I know folks, Toronto-based operators, private operators that have had experience in resolving that. Sometimes the key group there is PHAC and making the case to PHAC about the crews if a determination by a CBSA agent to quarantine is unfounded. So that's where we found some success. So feel free to reach out. If you've had a concern around CBSA and you haven't let us know, reach out, member support at cbaa.ca. We will connect, whether it's Merlin, it's the team, it's I, and there's Lindsay posting that. Thank you, 800-461-QUAD-9. We'll be able to assist you as best we can in making that case. But we're going to try working in the background to avoid these things on the front side as much as we can. So then maybe shifting, I'll talk a little bit about renewals as we kind of bring it into the back end of the conversation. Our renewals for membership is coming around the corner, and we'd ask that you update your information on the site. We can be a workhorse on the issues, the team here in Ottawa. We'll be your champion, and we can act as that dependable partner that you turn to when you've got an issue. But without your engagement, we'll all struggle. And I think I use this line, Leah Coca, you can lead, you can follow, and you can get out of the way. But with your support, together, we can lead the change that our industry needs as a result of COVID. The team in Ottawa obviously works to provide those value opportunities for members. And this is a great example of our members helping members, our associate partners. So this is the industry partner program. If you're an operator, these are the folks, these are associate members that want to work with you in this program. And as you look at that list, perhaps there's some value opportunities where they've committed in an effort to get your business some discounts, some opportunities, some preferential pricing, et cetera. So the industry partner program is important. It's a testament to the idea that, especially in times of COVID, this idea of members helping members is important, our associates and our operators. In terms of staying connected, it's important to share this. So, of course, we've got sort of our triage line, if you want to call it, our member support at cbaa.ca. It's the place that you can reach out to the member of the team, and we are able then to triage the concern. Perhaps it's an issue related to CBSA, it's airport taxes, it's some kind of operational concern with Transport Canada, et cetera. But we can triage that and get you the response that you need. For our flight operators, there's the WhatsApp tool. It's been very effective. We will continue to use this tool after COVID. Again, it's so important that we have an outlet that allows us to communicate directly with you and for you to communicate directly with us about the concerns that you're experiencing. And frankly, the biggest, I think, win of WhatsApp is that it's operators sharing stories of their experience and their best practices and what they've heard and what they've done. And it's staying connected in a way that allows all of us to proceed. So it's a fantastic tool. Social media continues to be a dominant force. I mean, Twitter for us is very important. And the reason is that our politicians are paying attention on Twitter. They're looking, they're sharing, they're commenting, liking, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of getting the message out there, if you want to stay in tune with what the association is doing, what letters we filed, what meetings we've had, both Twitter and LinkedIn are really important for the association. So please follow us there. As we look, I want to say thanks again to our sponsors. Without their support, Standard Aero and Trainingport, this opportunity for us to connect together, it's really important that we get to share your message with the folks here in Ottawa, whether it's the regulators, our government, our media. So we really appreciate their support for this session. Last and certainly not least is for you, our members, all right now 96. Evidently, the team and I are going to have to increase the count. So certainly we appreciate you following that meeting invite, making your way through, carving some time out of your day. It's important for us to stay connected on these issues. And I'll certainly, before we cut the line off, we have 15 minutes. I'm absolutely willing to continue to answer the questions in the chat. If you'd like to specifically ask one, all I'd ask is that you just write it in, either hit yes in the participant list, or just write, I have a question in the chat box, and then we'll go to that in time. But thanks to you, our members, for joining us today. It's important for us to connect. Our next event in November is the 19th, Thursday the 19th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the last one for the year will be December 17th at the same time. So let's look at the chat before we go for the time that we have. So I'm just going to read ESAN. One thing is worth mentioning is the engaging with local MPs is feedback that we've gotten in the past, and only the membership and their employees can drive that engagement, which is spot on, ESAN. So in the past, and why I celebrated the point of Erin O'Toole, Pierre Poilievre, Stephanie Kuzy, and some of the Liberal leaders is that we are getting into the places in Ottawa that our members can't, because you're busy running your day-to-day. And it's our job to promote and simplify your lives. And so what we are doing here, your voice helps us get more attention. It's just really bending the ear of the government. You've seen in letters, even as far back as I remember, even GTAA, when my time with the association, like the initial landing rights, then Montreal Airport, some of the changes with the runways and the collaboration with our airport partners led with Simone Roussel, Sky Service. It's your support of those letters. And we've done things to make your lives easier to do it. We've created templates so you can just cut and paste whatever information you want. And then we direct you into the channels. We're going to be doing more of that. But if we remain connected on that topic, it amplifies our voice. For example, the meeting with Stephanie Kuzy, the new transport critic, we engaged specifically with our Alberta-based operators, and more specifically the Calgary ones, because that message of Western Canada is what Stephanie is looking after as her role as a member of Parliament, but more specifically related to transport. We shared the concerns that our operators have, and that's an important point. So thanks, Isan, for raising that. Raquel asked the question, what has been the government said in response to your advocating? Well, look, I think what we've been able to do here is, I think the most interesting conversations to date. Well, a couple that I'd highlight, of course, Pierre Poilievre with respect to finance and the idea of championing this tool for business. They're very much about getting businesses moving, and we had a very productive discussion about what we in the industry have been facing. We've had some really good chats with leadership in Transport Canada. I would commend Nick Robinson and the team at Transport. The work that Merlin and the association that we're able to do with Transport is the result of Nick's leadership and the team at Transport Canada. They've certainly been working like crazy overtime. We recognize there is still a ton of work to go, and we're not going to take our foot off the gas there. But the leadership that Nick has shown at Transport is very productive and very useful. This includes the calls that they continue to do across the country, and that was an effort that we've had. So that's also why I shared that letter in closing with government. it's about educating those folks. And what we found, I think there are two official languages in Canada, but in order for your message to work with the government of the day, the opposition, et cetera, you need to find those bells that ring in their ear. And in other words, what are the issues that resonate with them, and how can we engage with them so that they understand the issues that are important to them and how they align with our industry? And that's the importance of the association, is to play with all levels of government in order to advocate for the industry. So on balance, the success that we've had, like meetings with PHAC, meetings with CBSA leadership, all of this, even though I jokingly put that slide of the snail up in that response, on balance, it's about getting us into the places that you want us to be so that your concerns are heard on behalf of the country. So let's see. I appreciate the kudos, and do keep us informed. Like, we're as we contemplate the back half of the year with 10 minutes remaining of time here, we are the team in Ottawa contemplating what does the back half of the year look like. Next year is an interesting one for us, for the association. We celebrate 60 years. So together, that's a pretty big milestone, and we're hoping, of course, that with our partner Sky Service in Toronto, that we can have that event in June. But with, of course, COVID, we are laser focused on what is immediately in front of us, as we are taking this 50 minutes today. In the news continues to be this talk of second wave, and we are very busy advocating for pushing against that day late, dollar short mentality. Let's use testing. Let's use business aviation. Let's get Canadians moving. Let's use science. Let's use database thinking. Let's remember the scientific method. Let's push and refine our techniques. And we have put collectively our industry's hand in the air to say, let us be the way forward, because we continue to fly. You continue to fly on our economy's behalf, on behalf of the businesses that you represent. And because of our smaller, more nimble, more agile nature, we can be the test case. The airlines are going to deal with their own challenges, the least of which are the financial concerns they have right now. But for us, we believe business aviation can be that session. Scott, thanks for the kudos there. I appreciate that. So what we'd say then is, feel free to stay connected. Again, member support, our WhatsApp group for our flight operators. If you haven't been included, feel free to reach out to the team through the email, membersupport@caa.ca. Stay tuned on our social channels. I'll remain available for, let's say, the next 9-10 minutes. I want to respect the time that you've provided. So thanks to each of you for coming. We will make this recording available. Please apologize to any of your counterparts if they try to join us. We will be ready in terms of increasing our Zoom meeting size for the next one, and feel free to use that calendar invite and accept the invite, so we know and appreciate the teams that are coming in. So thanks to each of you. We'll see you November 19th for this next session, and thanks for staying connected.